Good morning. So I've updated also for the benefit of anybody that's watching, I've updated the source sheet. I've done it in a way that I won't need to keep reprinting it. So you can keep these first 3 double pages. Those will be permanent. I will add on to them later. Understand? Mm-hmm. Okay. To recap, we have a fundamental machlokes, it would seem. There's no question. There's definitely a fundamental machlokes. The question is how to interpret it between the Rambam and the Raavad as to whether somebody who mistakenly believes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is or could be in any way physical, assume human form, is such a person considered to be a min, and therefore the halachas, the halachic persona, the identity and the hashlachot, the consequences of what that means vis-a-vis edus, etc., and our obligation to look after such a person and to love them, etc., does that apply to somebody who arrives at a mistaken conclusion? The Rambam says absolutely yes, and the Raavad says no. The question is, what is pshat in that machlekes? How far does that machlekes go? Does it also include somebody who makes a genuine mistake, reads a medrash, a Rashi, a Gemara, and gets the wrong pshat in it? Does that include such a person as well? Ladas HaRambam and Ladas HaRaavad. We saw yesterday very briefly, we'll quickly restate the basic idea, which is known in the Olam HaYeshivas as the Nebuch Apikoros. That's how it's known. That's how it's said over in the name of Reb Chaim Brisker. And we saw that the way Reb Elchanan seems to understand it is that the default position is, this is the way the Rambam understands, that a person should, by default, if he is unbiased, arrive at the conclusion that there is a Rebbeinu Shalom, that he doesn't have a body, etc. And it would appear to extend to all of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, and if somebody doesn't, then he is to blame. He is to blame. He could and should have worked it out himself, kind of thing. That seems to be the understanding. Now, let me first bring something in here. Turn over the page to source 3, which is something I only discovered recently. I have looked at this sugya for many years, quite a few years, and I only came across this Maramokim quite recently. And to my mind, it is quite an important Maramokim. It is no less an authority than the Or Sameach. So the Meshech Chochmah, right? Meir Simcha HaKohen says the following in the end of Hilchos Mikvos. So it's slightly obscure. I must admit I did not find it myself. I came across it in a Torah article I was reading on the subject, and it blew me away. Says the Or Sameach. And he's commenting on do we have a Rambam to hand? Is there a Rambam there behind you? But I grab one from the other. Just very briefly, I'm sorry, because I think it is important. Yes, the Rambam Tahara, Hilchos Mikvos. Please, thank you so much. It's important to see the Rambam upon which he bases his comments.
So the view of the Rambam says is heretic is to think that God can become human form.
That's where he says that very clearly. Now we're going to see that it's not all that tzaddik shkoyach. Now let me just share something with you. Okay. Let me share something, sort of a bit more generally with you. The Rambam, his mahalach, his style, his format, generally speaking, in Mishnah Torah, in Yad, it's halachic. Every now and again, he gives us some gems of which perhaps are meta halachic, hashkafa ideas. Do you know where you would find those always? Often, wherever they are to be found, and there are a few of them, usually they are at the end of a set of halachas. When he comes to the end of a set of halachas, there's a whole bunch of them. Shemitah v'yovel, Tmura, Milah, there's a whole bunch of them, where sometimes you can find incredible ideas which appear to be more hashkafic than halachic, where he finishes off a whole set of halachas. The end of Hilchos Shabbos, the end of Hilchos Chanukah, there's a beautiful one all about Shalom. And so he goes like more into, so to speak, Moreh Nevuchim style. You with me? And the reason for this, if I may be so bold, is a Rambam himself. The Rambam writes in Pirush HaMishnayos, Soif Perek Kama de Brachos, at the end of the first Perek of Brachos, he writes, and I heard it a number of times from my Rebbe, Matzio Salomon Zatzal, let's see if I can quote it, to see if I can remember it. He excuses himself in his Pirush HaMishnayos, at the end of the first Perek of Brachos, he excuses himself in Pirush HaMishnayos for having spoken at length about some hashkafa. He says, because Choviv Alai Lefaresh the Divrei Ha'agodos more than anything else. He excuses himself. It's a beautiful Rambam. He says, mein liebste Sach, sozusagen. The thing I love to do more than anything else is to share and explain Divrei Ha'agodos. Yoser mikol asher alamdehu. More than anything else that I teach. Fascinating glimpse and an insight into the Rambam. So Maramokim Aniloch, it's a good Maramokim Pirush HaMishnayos, write it down, you should have it. But Pirush HaMishnayos at the end of the first Perek of Brachos. So he lets himself go, so to speak, and he does here very beautifully at the end of Hilchos Mikvos, upon which the Or Sameach comments. I'm going to read you the Rambam. The Rambam writes that the following. He says, Dovar Barur Ugoloi, V'goloi. Sorry, I am now officially old. I have reading glasses. I'm officially an old age pensioner. Actually, have reading glasses for my sins. So here we go. Dovar boror v'goloi shehatumois v'hatarois gzeras hakosov hein. So when I can see the Rambam, I can't see you. You're a bit blurry, a bit fuzzy. Sorry. So maybe I should use. This should be maybe maybe it should be Shmir Sinaim glasses. Maybe I should wear these in the street. It's not a bad idea. Do not think of the halachas of Tumah and Tahara, ritual purity and impurity. A woman isn't unclean, and that's why she goes to the mikveh. Yes, so it's an important idea. It is a ruchniistic thing. It's a gzeres hakosov. Ve'enon medvarim shedatu shalodom machra'as oison v'harehen mechlal hachukim. These are not rational. These are not logical ideas. They are firmly incorporated within the body of Torah called chukim, things which you can't work out, you can't understand. V'chein hatvila min hatumois mechlal hachukim hi she'ein hatuma tit oitzoya shetavar b'mayim. Tumah isn't a physical thing which is not nice. No, it's gzeres hakosov. V'hadavar toloi bekavonas halev. Wow, it is toila on kavonas halev. Ulefi chachamru chachamim toval v'loy huchzak ki'ilu loy toval. Therefore, Chazal say if somebody went to mikveh but he didn't have a chezkas tahara, he didn't make sure that he was toher beforehand, it's ki'ilu loy toval. We won't go into that halacha. Kavonas halev. So, for example, chazaka, which you establish through a state of consciousness. So, with a woman doing a hefsek tara, you understand, you have to establish a chezkas tara. The afal pikein. Now, here he says, remez yesh bedava. Okay. Now, this is it. The last few lines of Hilchos Mikvos. Classic Rambam. V'afal pikein reb. So even though I've told you, don't make the mistake of thinking it's something logical or rational, it isn't. But nevertheless, there is a remez. Kashem shehamachavin liboy letaher kiven shetov al tohar v'afal pishlein ischadesh begufoy dava. Here's a remez, says the Rambam. In the same way that somebody who has kavana for tahara, he had kavana. He knew what he was doing. He didn't just dip he didn't just have a dip in a river. He knew he had kavana to be metaher. Since once he did tvila, he's taher. Va'afal pishlein ischadesh begufay. Even though physically he is the same. Kach hamachavein liboy letaher nafshoy mitumas hanefoshois. So somebody who has kavana to purify his soul from spiritual illnesses. Shehin machshavos ha'ovoin v'deos ha'ra'os. Somebody has bad midas, and he has kavana. He thinks, I really would want to become rid of my gaiva, my tava, my jealousy, all these bad things, and he really thinks about it. Kiven shehiskim beliboy lifrosh me'oson ha'etzos. Once you decide, that's it, I'm going to be in control of my anger, of my whatever it is, Vehevi nafshoy b'mei hada'as. It's not enough. and he brings his nefesh into the waters of das, of knowledge, he becomes tahir. Harehu oimer, v'zarakti aleichem mayim tahirim, mikol utaharta mikol tumeisechem, umikol gilulechem ataher eschem, and with that he finishes Hilchos Mikvos. It's a beautiful Rambam. Okay? So worth reading and understanding. What does he mean by mehad das? Does he mean Torah? And that's another topic. I'll just very quickly reference another Rambam in Hilchos Isurei Bia, where the Rambam says, when he's talking about the Yetzer Hara for aroyos, right, for immorality, for sexual immorality, he says a famous lashon, says the Rambam, ve'ein tavas haroyos mutzuyo ela belev haponoi min hachochma. Worth looking at that one as well, although it's not at the end. I think it's Perek Yud Aleph. Leiv haponoi min hachochma. An heart that is empty and is not focused on knowledge, on Torah, that's when aroyos get in. But it's somebody who is a ben Torah, somebody who is his cheshek, and here's, I don't want to go too much off topic. There's a Zohar, there's a beautiful Zohar that says, Ilmole yitzrad aroyos chedvasa do'iraisa lo lahav. The taiva for Torah is a taiva, and it should be. It's a taiva, and it replaces the other taiva. And this is what people often misunderstand, that when they're trying to struggle free from anything, but certainly from aroyos, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to be careful, I'm going to guard my eyes, which is, of course, you must, and it's very important. But it's not enough, because this is about pleasure. We are a pleasure-seeking organism. We are designed to seek pleasure. And therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us something. Mesamchei Levi gave us something to give us pleasure. You have to replace one pleasure with another. It's not good enough just to say, I'm just going to abstain, It won't work. It'll work for the short term. But we are designed, whether it's the dopamine release, however, without going into the the chemistry or the psychology, it's irrelevant. But you have to feed, you have to have something which you have to want to learn, you have to enjoy it, you have to replace one taiva with another. It's a really important idea. I just want to mention that. I once heard that I'm not sure who, that's why, the Gemara always says, when it talks about if somebody unmarried has a relationship with an unmarried man with an unmarried woman, what's the lashon that is used? Honoi haba al hapnuya. And I once heard, I think it's B'Shem Rav Hutner or Rav Moshe Shapiro, I forget. Beautiful diuk. Why does it say ponoi haba al hapnuya? It's a reference to that Rambam, that aroyos is only motzi belev haponoi min hachochma. Somebody's heart is ponoi, it's empty, it's turned aside from chokhmah, then you have a ponoi, will be ba'al hapnuya. You have to fill your heart with something that gives you energy and pleasure. That's all, by the way. This was all, I didn't intend saying any of that, but that is just the Rambam, now the Or Sameach here. So I've set the scene, okay? That was the Rambam. Here comes the Chiddush, which to me was a Chiddush. I've never seen this Or Sameach before. Says the Or Sameach, U'mashe kosev Rabbeinu oid, k'shem shehamachaven libo letahir, kiven shetov al tahor, kach hamachaven libo letahir nafshoi, v'deyois horois kiven shehiskim. What does he mean by that? Says the Or Sameach. When the Rambam says that a person needs to focus himself to be matahir himself from bad midas or bad ideas, what does it mean? And I've put it in bold here. Hamachuvan. Ki ha'pu'ulois horois einom rak b'hiyois na'asim barotzon. Here he does an incredible philosophical thing, really. He says as follows. A bad action, a bad actor, a bad agency, when a person does a bad deed, that only has significance and meaning when it is done consciously, with cognition, where you know what you are doing. So a bad action depends very much on mens rea. It depends if you know the Latin, if you learn law. It depends on you knowing what you're doing. You did so consciously. Aval im nif'olim ba'oinus ubehechrach, einom mashchisim hanefesh. But a bad action that is done force majeure, right? I didn't even know I was doing it, or I was forced to do it. I didn't do so willingly. Einom mashchisim hanefesh. Dr. Sameach, if you do a bad maisa and aveira, but you don't do it barotzoin, you do it, he says oinus, he doesn't say shogeg, which is okay, we could think about this, but certainly if you do not attach the mental and psychological desire and consciousness to that action, einam mashchisim hanefesh. It does not negatively impact the nefesh. Lochein oines rachmana patre. Therefore, we have this rule, as you know, v'lanaro loisase dovo. We learn oines rachmana patre. Somebody does something, but oines, the Torah lets you off. V'hakorbonois sherubam boim ala puulois hamagunois einam ba'oines. When you have to bring a korban for doing a terrible aveira, there's no korban if you do something ba'oines. Only b'shoigeg. I knew what I was doing. I turned the light on, but I thought it was Tuesday. So you knew what you were doing. But if you were oines, then there's no, or you were a misasek. I brushed it with my elbow. I didn't even have any. This is not a conscious act. It has no impact on the nefesh. The unsa commander loy of it. And oines, it's as if you've done nothing. Loy kein hatumois shehin leneged deos hamashuboshois umachshevois ha'oven. This is not so with the tumah that comes about as a result of bad midas or bad hashkofas. Afshenis havu ba'odam oy misibas ha'oines. Even though it's not your fault, you were. I don't want to elaborate. For you did not consciously or willfully deny. Let's take something. Let's say our original Rambam, Hagshoma, right? I didn't set about through any willful. I want to deny the authority or power of Hashem. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say he can assume human form. No, I read a medrash, whatever, and I came to an incorrect conclusion. The reason I did it, my motivation was not sinister. It wasn't negative. That's not why I did it. But it came about as an onus. I ended up, I didn't mean to, but I read a medrash and I came out with the wrong conclusion. But it's conscious. Not that you with me, not that I wanted to come to the wrong conclusion. Of course not. I wanted to come to the right conclusion. I came to a conclusion which I thought was correct. It turns out to be wrong. But it's an onus. He says makes no difference. The tumah, fascinating. What he calls the tumah nafshi that comes about. He says it very clearly. I investigated, I researched, I learned, I tried to understand, and I came to the wrong conclusion. The shleimus of the ummah. Here we come to an interesting thing. I don't know if you're aware anything about Arabic or Muslim politics, but this is a word that they use, the ummah. Very much, it's a word from Lashon HaKodesh, of course. But we have an ummah, we have a kehillah, we have Klal Yisrael. Remember the Rambam paskened that the main halachic consequences of somebody who becomes a min or a kofar or an apikoros is that he is not considered to be part of Klal Yisrael vis-a-vis the mitzvah. Le'evosoi, to help him, to love him, to look after him, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And this is what he's saying. Says the Or Sameach, and this Or Sameach, la'aniyus daiti, would appear to be a vindication or a corroboration of the Reb Chaim approach, the Nebuch HaPikoros approach. He says it virtually clearly. The fact that you came about this as a result of an oinus or you made a mistake, mikol makom, but there's a metzius. Rochiku me'ashlam shleimus ha'umah. You are distant. Ubeloi tahara mushlalhu miboy bikloluyos Yisrael b'hoifia Hashem oiroi aleihem. L'shoinus that only the Or Sameach would write. It was unbelievable.
What is it, Dalek?
Hashem. Without tahara, if you do not reverse this position by immersing yourself in what the Rambam calls mehadas, this person is just negated from mushlalhu. He is rochik from coming into kloluyus Yisrael. B'hoifia Hashem oiroi aleihem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks after and he is moifia oirom Klal Yisrael. You are not part of that, and it makes no difference. Even though you didn't have bad intentions, he says, but when it comes to deos, which are wrong, the impact, the tumah, the disconnect that it causes it's irrelevant how and why. Absolutely fascinating, Or Sameach.
Are you familiar with the introduction of Tevis word of the Ma'arav?
I am. And I mean, if you're already talking to Tevis Yisrael, really what you're looking at is Perek Hay over there. Perak Hey and Perak Ches, if I'm not mistaken.
I didn't go so far.
Okay, keep going. It's debatable whether he will agree with this, possibly. L'tzaref es Yisrael, that bit there, on the Gemara in Chulin.
No, he says that if somebody learns and they come to that conclusion,
Halachically, we're not talking about halachically. We're not, very good, of course. We learn Beis Shammai. If I want to learn a Mishnah, which is, or Sugya, which is only explaining Beis Shammai, even though we don't pass like it, I have to say Bechzat Torah, it's Torah. Very important. You're touching on a good thing, but no.
Because it seems, like you're right, because the whole tone of the introduction is, as long as you have the right intention, and your intention is to be close to God's Baruch, etc., the mistakes you do shouldn't hold you back, because what?
That's mistakes
when you make a mistake, even if you say in davening, I hate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you want to say I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
That's a medrash. That's already a medrash. That's a medrash. V'oyavta es Hashem Elokecha. It's a medrash. It's a yalkut. If a person says by mistake, v'oyavta es Hashem Elokecha, v'ohavta, that's v'dilugoy alai ahava, diguloi, yeah, fine. But this, correct, v'dilugoy alai ahava, I'll take v'dilugoy, I'll take v'digloi ala v'dilugoy. Yeah, it's a yalkut there. But that's, I think that's muddying the waters. That is in halal. Not this. Correct. So this is La'aniyas Daiti, an incredible Sameach, and would appear to lend support to the position of Reb Chaim Brisker. It would appear to. However, Rabbi Yisai, and here I want to make a point, and you can write this down in your notes, because you can hold me to this, because this is going to be important that we don't lose ourselves in some of the lengthy sources, which I'm going to run through. Don't be afraid or put off by it, because we want to stand back and get a big picture. We, in Yitz Hashem, over the next few days, are going to quote 5. I'm deciding whether to include a 6th, but I think we'll stick to 5 Rambams. 3 in Yad, 1 in a Tshuva of the Rambam, and 1 in Moreh Nevuchim. Either write it down or memorize it. There appear to be 3 Rambams in Yad that are relevant for us. We've seen 1 of them so far, right? There's 3 Rambams in Yad. There is 1 in a Tshuva and 1 in Moreh Nevuchim. And from that, we're going to build up a picture. So far, we've seen 1, and that is the Rambam in Hilchos Teshuva, which seems to be quite straightforward. Certainly the way Reb Chaim Brisker seems to understand it, that if a person makes a mistake in, let's for the moment say, one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim, such a person is considered to be a min. Okay? And the halachas of min, kofa, apikoros applies to him. So far. Okay? And, okay, that's number 1. We're now going to move on to the second Rambam, which is source 4 here, which is Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim. Okay? I'm sorry, I don't know about you, but I'm hot. Mamrim is the halachas of there are structures through which, most notably the Zaken Mamre, where somebody needs a Yid, and especially a member of Sanhedrin, needs to accept the halachic process. Probably the most famous case of this is Rabbi Eliezer, right? You all know the famous story with Rabbi Eliezer, so that's probably the most famous story. That that's right, the Tanu Shalachnoi. We have a system, and the system is designed to give, it might be kedai to look at this if you're really interested in this in the Sefer HaChinuch, Tov Sadi Vav, I think it is, to understand it. But the idea is that we have a system. There is, as halacha is being laid down in Torah Sheba'al Peh, so we have a system whereby we resolve disputes, right, with Sanhedrin, acharei rabim lahatois, finished. And once a decision has been made, everybody has to support that decision. And if you don't, at the most extreme level, if a person insists, one of the members of Sanhedrin, theoretically it's a capital offense. Okay? That's a psukim in the Torah, as we know. And the Rambam wrote a set of halachas to explain this, Hilchos Mamrim. And here we're going to look at 3 halachas in Hilchos Mamrim. Let's see how the Rambam paskins. Because this, you know what, I'm going to read and translate them without comment, and I'm actually going to, let's get some more participation going. We'll make sure everybody's still awake. Yeah? We good? Yeah. Zog the Rambam. Perek Gimel Mamrim halacha Aleph. Misha eina moida b'Torah sheba'al peh, eino zoken mamrei ha'amur b'Torah. If somebody doesn't agree with Torah Shabbal Peh, he is not a Zoken Mamre, as the Torah says, but he's generally Hariz Bechlalo Apikoros. He's just a regular run-of-the-mill Apikoros. Fine. Okay. Base. Somebody, once it becomes publicized and clear and public knowledge that this person denies the validity of Torah Shabbal Peh, etc. Right? Somebody says, Ein Torah min hashamayim, shekol elu. All of these people, Einam Bichlal Yisrael. They're not included in Klal Yisrael. So somebody who denies the validity of the oral law and the system, Einam Bichlal Yisrael, Ve'ein Tzarech Loila Eidim, Loila Hasra, Loila Dayonim.
But the city is full of...
Rega. We'll park it for 10 shiurim time. We'll get there.
I'm dealing with them every day.
We will get there, my friend. Yes, we know. We will get there. Don't say or do anything until we get to the end.
No.
Okay. Right. So, what is the Rambam? Rambam has established that somebody who denies the validity of Torah Shabbal Peh is an apikoros and is not, so to speak, considered to be part of Klal Yisrael. Now, here Halacha Gimel is where it gets interesting. I put it in bold. Ba'amed dvarim amurim be'ish shekofar b'Torah Shabbal Peh b'machshavtoi u'b'dvarim sheniru loi. Somebody made the decision himself using his own thought process and things that he researched and saw and things that appear logical and reasonable and plausible to him. V'holach achar da'atoi hakala v'achashrirus liboi v'koife b'Torah Shabbal Peh tchila k'tzodoik u'baitus v'chein kol hatoim achrov. He followed his own light mind, meaning he was arrogant, which is always the litmus test, but we'll leave that for another time. And he, as a result of that, he personally himself arrived at the wrong conclusion. Aval b'nei hatoyim ha'ele, second generation sidukim by Tusim, right? Ubnei b'neihem, and their grandchildren, shehidichu oisam, that they were pushed away. Shehidichu oisam avoisam, their forefathers pushed them away. V'noildu bein hakaroim, and they were brought up amongst the Karaites, right? The Karaites who deny the validity of Torah Shabbal Peh. So if you are a second, third, fourth, or any subsequent generation of Karoi, you were brought up that way. Let's maybe give it a modern moshel, a reformed Jew, third generation, fourth generation, fifth. And this is the way you were brought up. V'gidlu oisam al datam, harei hu ketinoik shenishba b'neihem. Then he has the din of a tinik shenishba, a child that was captured. V'gidluhu ve'enoi zoriz le'echois b'darkei hamitzos, and this person is not diligent to keep mitzvos. Sheharehu ka'onus. He's an onus. It's not his fault. What do you expect of a kid that grows up in the middle of, I don't know where, doesn't matter where, and he's brought up, and his whole life he goes to a conservative temple, a reform temple, and to him, he's told basically that the rabbis, where there's a rabbinic will, there's a halachic way, and the Pharisees and the rabbis, whatever. I don't need to tell you all the shtusim, and that's how he's brought up. And to him, that is his norm. He is a tinik shenishba. He's an onus. Even though he heard later Shehu Yehudi, that he's Jewish, and he saw a National Geographic documentary about these sects of crazy guys who live in Williamsburg, and he saw them with their funny coats and their weird things, and he thought, that's really interesting from an anthropological perspective, and hey, I'm also Jewish. How fascinating, right? Because he was brought up with the mistake. Kach elu she'omarnu. So the Karaites, who were also brought up, third, fourth, fifth generation, that there's no such thing as Torah Shabbal Peh. So what do we do to them? It is our job to be makar of them, and to speak nicely to them, and to use darkei noyam to bring them close until they return to the rock of eternity, to the rock of Torah. So, that is the Rambam here. Any comments, my friends?
Yeah, it seems that with this terms now, this תינוקות שנשבו, we can say on everyone, this תינוק שנשבו.
But I'm not, you see, at the moment we are not making a comment. We're studying the text here. You need to comment in connection to something that we've already learned. That's what I'm really looking for.
I would like to understand if this
Yes.
תינוק שנשבע is also, goes with also שמח, which says that they are not part of the כלליות Israel.
That is a very good question. How are we going to, but can I, with respect to you, I want a better question. You're asking how it's a valid question, you're quite right, and we need to deal with this. How does the Or Sameach in this Rambam? I think there's a more fundamental question here. Thank you.
What?
It would appear to be a contradiction in the Rambam himself. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says that somebody who, well,
but this is clear. This is not
the Rambam, let's go again. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, source number 1, somebody who believes that Hashem can assume human form, he's a kaifa, he's a min, he's an apikoros. Now we have a Rambam says, but if it was an honest mistake, that was the way he was brought up, he's okay. So we could answer that, and I think I now understand why Guy didn't ask that, because we could turn around and say, how do we reconcile these two Rambams, Eli? By saying they're talking about two different things. This is somebody who's first generation, or he arrived at the Messiah, he should have known better, and this is a Tinnik Shenish, who shouldn't have known better. The problem is, and here's where Guy is right, that if, according to Rabbi Chanan Sameach, they've closed down the door for us to make that distinction, and now we have a problem. If you hold a Nebuch and Apikoros is also an Apikoros, how does Reb Chaim understand this Rambam? That's the problem. It's a massive problem. And we can add to this, how would the Or Sameach understand this problem? And for this, we are going to attempt so we've done 2 Rambams so far, Tshuva and Mamrim, more to go, 2 down, 3 to go. And today, so now we're going to learn a Tshuva. I was debating how to do this. There's a number of different approaches, but I found a really interesting Tshuva from Rav Moshe Steinbuch, who discusses this, okay? And he quotes the Briskerov as to how the Rambam, how Reb Chaim would understand the Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim, okay? Source 5. Tshuvas Van Hogus, Chele Gimel Simon Tov Pei. He had a shaila from Johannesburg about Kiruv Rechokim, and he goes as follows: Zeh achshav kibalti kan bi Johannesburg. He was living in Johannesburg at the time. Yeah, he lived for a while in Johannesburg. So he says, I've received a shaila here in Johannesburg, a shaila about Kiruv Rechokim. V'lo yadati lama panai. I don't know why he came to me, but once I've got the question, I'll answer you. V'shoyresh hashaila etzlai. Im lekarev koidem ha'anusim shehim begidre tinnik shenishba. Where do you put your priorities? You know, and this is another fascinating topic. When we talk about kiruv chinuch, it's always a question of resources, money, time, personnel, resources. Where do you focus? What is priority? So this was a question of priority. Where do we focus? Do we focus on those who are secular Jews, for want of a better term, who were never brought up, and do classic kiruv? Should we do that? Or maybe those Jews that were formerly Orthodox but went off the derech, to use the common term. So that when the shaila came to him, the person who asked the shaila felt that those who'd gone off the derech had a greater danger. But it's not clear, because sometimes there's a tinnik shenishba who's in a greater danger. Sorry, presumably spiritual danger, not physical danger, obviously.
No, like
spiritual danger. He doesn't specify, so I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to read and translate. Okay. Uladati loy motzosi kan mokim sheila ve'en lechalek ubemisha roya yosa sheyatzliach tzorich lifal. Says Moshe Steinbuch a really interesting thing. He says, I don't understand really. He says, I don't really see the need for a shaila. Whoever you think you'll have more hatzlacha with, you should do. Interesting. So focus on general, I suppose, common sense in a way, but this is his das Torah. Wherever you feel that if you put your energies, you will have more chance of success, do that. And then he says as follows: V'hine, in bnei hamishpacha charedim, Milvad HaKirov yesh b'zeh tova gedola u'tzedakah v'chesed l'hoirim u'lemishpacha l'hashiv leiv banim la'avos. He adds another dimension. When there is lo yaleinu v'lo yaleichem, somebody within a frum family that goes off the derech, that creates an additional layer of tension within the family. And therefore, if you manage to return to the fold somebody who has strayed from a frum family, then you're also, additionally, besides for the tremendous chesed you're doing for the person themselves, you're also helping stabilize and bring normalcy and bring together family members, which is a big chesed. Interesting. Although it is true, if you do the same thing to somebody who's secular, that you are bringing nachas to their great or grandparents, whatever, but from the perspective of the chesed, the chesed of those that are still alive is greater. Okay, fascinating little point. Umaron hagoin de brisk, Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik Zatzal Omar b'shem Oviv Hagrach. Now here, he quotes he was close to the Briskerov, Ramesh Temach. So he quotes Reb Chaim, and he says, Sha'afilu tinik shenishba hu apikairos raku nebach. So here's the famous quote that we've been discussing, right? Reb Chaim says that a nebach and apikairos is an apikairos. V'diktik maron zal b'lashoyno harambam per gimel mamrim halacha gimel. Our Rambam. So the Briskerov was medayik in the Rambam that we just learned, but tinik shenishba, shehagirsa b'dfus yoshon, there are different girsa'os, textual variants. The girsa in the old text was lefichach roi lachziram b'tshuva ulemoishchan b'divrei shalom ad sheyachzru le'esan ha'torah v'lo yemaher adam lahorgan. Additional words we don't have. A person shouldn't be quick to kill them. And again, I'm not going to go into the let me have a look again, make sure I haven't. Yeah. We're not talking, obviously this is at a time when it was appropriate to do so, and of course this doesn't apply, but he adds words, and a person shouldn't be quick. Lo yemaher adam lahorgan. Person shouldn't be quick to do them harm. Interesting. It seems this was umavur b'zeh shel ha'olam heim apikaris. Now here, the Briskerov is endeavoring to do that which we asked. How are we going to use, how is Reb Chaim going to explain the Rambam in Mamrim? That's our problem. So here he's starting. He adds, he says in the old Girsa, it had words at the end, don't be quick to do them harm. Umavur b'zeh, shel ha'olam heim apikoros, ela shel inyan lahorgan ein lemaher b'kach, kiven sharoi lemoshchan le'esan ha'torah, shekal yoser shehem mutoin. He learns out, he puts a lot of weight on these final words. That because the Rambam says, don't be memaher lahorgan, it's mashma that really they are apikosim, but because it was through no fault of their own, and there is a good chance of you being able to succeed, being machzir them b'tshuva, therefore don't hurry up lahorgan. But really they are actually apikosim. Fascinating. Mash'ein kein b'shana upiresh v'hu apikoros b'shita. Mash'ein kein, the first generation, somebody who knew better and decided to become an apikoros, then of course it's going to be very difficult to get that person to change their mind. And that's how the Briskerov suggests that Reb Chaim would understand this Rambam here in Hilchos Mamrim to differentiate between tzaddik and baitus, those at the beginning of a movement. Imagine trying to persuade a reform rabbi in 1880, 1890, where they were convinced that what they were doing was reforming Judaism for the better. Forget it, you would never. But in a third, fourth, fifth generation, they just grew up that way. Their emotional attachment to the movement isn't so strong, and maybe there's a chance of bringing them back. But really, as they stand, their status suggests the Briskerov, the Reb Chaim, as they stand, really there's no contradiction between the two Rambams, and the rule of Nebuch HaPikoros remains. The Chiddush over here is that because their connection to their mistake is third, fourth, is just generational, you've got a good chance of being machzir them b'tshuva, so don't play out all of the halachic consequences of being an apikoros, and try and do your best and see that you might be able to be machzir them b'tshuva. That's how he understands it, which is interesting. Let's go on. Aval bizmanenu, mikoived hagolus v'hashgochas hakodesh baruch hu behester b'toich ha'hester. However, says the I think he's quoting still the Brisker Rav, that nowadays, where the darkness of Golus, and we don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly at all, as it says, Rabim Sorum in Aderech. The reason they went off the derech, because they didn't have proper chinuch to teach them properly how to go karoi b'darkei Hashem Yisbarach and Kedushas HaTorah mitzvahs. V'lochein mevi HaChazon Ish b'Yerodei Siman Beis. And here, this is the classic, which I didn't even put in my notes because I'm sure you've all learned the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish famously said that today, apikorasim today do not have the halacha of a classic apikoros. She'ein b'hem klal din meiridin. The halacha of doing harm to them does not apply at all. And they should be just brought close with ahava. If you see that it is possible to draw them close, then they mamash have a din of a tinik shenishba. Aval ha'emes she'afilu hamasisim. Shemitzvah lehoid fom leroid fom va'aleim einu mispalalim yom yom onu mispalalim yom yom sheyevedu hainu mishum sheim begeder roidef aval ksheyesh bem takona ta'ef shelifel shelo yaziku lachzirim b'tshuva v'yesh lam oizen kashavas ein lanu nisya shrak b'poil. He says an incredible thing. He goes further. He says, even those that are actively seducing Yidden away from Yiddishkeit, even them, and I think this is Ramesh himself, I don't think this is the Brisker Rav. Even they, if you think you have a chance of striking up a relationship with them and possibly helping them, bringing them back, you should do that as well. So he's flipping it round, quite interesting. Even though Mechal Shabbos b'Fahesia, there's no chiv of techacha.
You could say, if you help them, you help even more people at the same time because they will be Correct. Soif Dava. Let's move on. I want to rush through this. Soif Dava anu mechuyavim lifoil v'lasais kishenira shenucha lifoil. Therefore, the final decision is that we are absolutely obligated to do whatever we can if we think that we have a chance of success. It doesn't matter how far they've fallen. The only time we would treat somebody harshly is somebody who is has the din of a roidef, is a pursuer. Basically, he goes on. He's giving chizuk to this person who's involved in kiruv. See what else is relevant for us. V'dai b'dvarim elu b'chodesh hatshuva. Obviously, he wrote this in Elul. And then he finishes off with something. Let's just go to the last paragraph on page 4. Fascinating. V'asayim b'dova toiv. Shamati. He said, I heard from Rav Moshe Schneider Zatzal, who was a Rosh Yeshiva of Schneider's Yeshiva in London, Talmud of the Chavetz Chaim. Shahagon v'tzadik Rabbi Yisrael Salanta yorad milita le Paris lifel shama. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta went from Lita to Paris to be involved in Kiruv. V'tanu lefanov. So people said to him, they asked him, Halai odif lifel belita, surely you can achieve more in Lita. V'heishiv shebelita hamatzavu kamoi har im madroim. He says in Lita, it's like a mountain on a diagonal, right? In Lita, he said, the power of the maskilim, those who were the intellectual heretics, was so strong, he said, it's like a ball on a hill. If we do nothing, the default is it pulling people right down. And if you're already halfway down, you need to have a strong force to stop it. You need an equal force, physics, to stop it. Aval Paris, they've come to rest at rock bottom in Paris. There's no fight. The fight has gone out of them. They've rolled all the way down the hill spiritually, and they've come to rest. Fascinating idea. At rock bottom. And they see the outcome. Shahaskola merid midechi el dechi v'shama, and maybe there ulai kal yoselifo. Sometimes it's easier to do something when they've hit rock bottom. There's nowhere else to go, and therefore he says that he thinks he could do more there. Fascinating. So Salanta went from Lita to Paris because he felt so interesting. I mean, you can analyze this. There's a lot to be said for this.
what he was saying was, this is a justification of the approach, I would think, where you look at where am I more likely to be successful. Fascinating.
Berlin, sorry, Berlin is more lit or Paris?
Good question. Well, Rega. Good question. I'm here to teach Torah. Right. He says today, the Moshe Schneider says today, that is where we are at. So we have, to summarize, we had we'll leave it here for today. So we had a second Rambam, which would be difficult to understand with Reb Chaim and the Ur Sameach. We have Reb Moshe Steinbuch quoting the Briskerov to resolve the problem by saying what? That by utilizing the additional words that are found in some Girusos in the Rambam, ve'ein lemaher lahoirgon, that really he believes that the two Rambams are compatible, and with Reb Chaim's approach, that really such a person is an Apikoros, even though he's a Nebuch, but he is an Apikoros. But the second, third, fourth generations where they just don't know any better, don't rush to put into effect any practical negative things, but we should be conscious that we have a chiyuv of doing teshuvah. I will add before we go further, and I'll stop here for today. It is not poshet. It's not poshet. It's a slightly forced explanation, and we'll see the other approaches as we go along. Shkaya.